The sun was setting when Donna Harrington first discovered the betrayal. It was an ordinary evening, the faint hum of traffic outside her apartment window providing a familiar soundtrack as she sat at her kitchen table, paying bills. Donna had always been careful with her finances. A 35-year-old marketing executive, she had built a life of independence and stability in a family that had, at times, demanded more from her than it gave in return. But as Donna scanned her bank statement, her heart began to race. A large, unfamiliar charge loomed at the bottom of the list, $127,500. The destination? A luxury travel agency specializing in bespoke European tours. Her mind spun. That was more than her annual salary, and she hadn't planned any vacations, let alone something that extravagant. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number of the agency listed on her credit card statement. The representative confirmed her worst fear. Her credit card had been used to book an exclusive European trip for 3, set to depart in 2 weeks. The names listed? Her parents, Robert and Helen Harrington, and her younger sister, Karen. Donna could barely breathe. She had lent her parents her credit card details once, for emergencies only. But this? This was no emergency. This was theft, and from her own family. Her phone rang almost immediately after she hung up with the travel agency. It was her mother. "Oh, Donna, you're going to love this," Helen chirped, oblivious to the storm brewing on the other end of the line. "We booked the most fantastic trip for Karen's graduation. You'll be proud of her, she's finally getting to see the world. How did you book it?" Donna's voice was low, trembling with the effort to keep her composure. "Oh, don't worry about that, sweetheart. We used your credit card to take advantage of the points for upgrades. It's a win-win. Really. We'll pay you back. Eventually." The casual dismissal of Donna's trust, the audacity of assuming such a thing was acceptable, hit her like a physical blow. Her mind went blank for a moment, before surging with a wave of anger. "You used my credit card without asking?" she hissed, barely containing her fury. "Mom, that's not a small charge. It's over $127,000. Helen's tone turned defensive, a shift Donna had come to expect. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It's Karen's graduation. Don't you want to celebrate your sister? Besides, we'll pay it off in time. You don't need to make such a fuss." Fuss? Donna's mind reeled. Her credit card was maxed out, her financial future put at risk, and she was being told not to make a fuss? Her family's selfishness and entitlement, long buried under years of compliance and playing the role of the dutiful daughter, suddenly rose to the surface. The argument escalated. Helen's voice sharpened, accusing Donna of being selfish, penny-pinching, and ruining her sister's special moment. Donna's heart pounded with a mix of rage and betrayal. She could feel her grip on the phone tightening. "I'm calling the credit card company," Donna said coldly. "This is fraud." The conversation ended in a flurry of accusations and slammed phones. Donna sat at her kitchen table, staring at the wall, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Her parents, the people who were supposed to protect her, had stolen from her. And worse, they didn't even see it as wrong. The next few days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. Donna had always been the responsible one, the dependable daughter who worked hard to support herself and occasionally help her family. But she had never expected this level of betrayal. She reported the charge as fraudulent to the credit card company, hoping they could resolve the situation. The process was grueling, multiple calls, filling out paperwork, and waiting for the investigation to unfold. Meanwhile, the tension with her family only grew. Karen, oblivious to the turmoil she had caused, posted excited updates on social media about the upcoming trip. Each post felt like a fresh wound to Donna, a reminder of the deep divide that had opened between her and the people she thought she could trust. Donna's father, Robert, called her a few days later, hoping to smooth things over. But his words only deepened the rift. "You know how your mother is," he said, his voice tired. "She just wants to make Karen happy. Can't you let this go? We'll figure out the money." "Figure it out?" Donna snapped. "Dad, this isn't pocket change. This is my entire financial security on the line. You can't just expect me to look the other way." "You're overreacting," Robert replied, his tone dismissive. "It's for Karen. She deserves this after all her hard work. There it was again, the relentless favoritism, the constant dismissal of Donna's feelings and contributions. Her entire life, she had been second to Karen, the golden child. And now, her own financial stability was being sacrificed at the altar of her sister's success. Karen herself was no better. When Donna confronted her, hoping for some semblance of understanding, Karen simply shrugged. "I didn't ask them to use your card, but it's done now. Besides, it's not like you can't afford it." "Afford it?" Donna's voice cracked with disbelief. "Karen, this could ruin me financially. You don't get to just brush this off." Karen waved her hand dismissively, as if Donna's concerns were trivial. "Look, I get it, you're upset. But this is my graduation, and I deserve something special. Can't you just be happy for me?" The conversation ended in a stalemate, leaving Donna feeling more isolated than ever. Her family had always been dysfunctional, but this felt like a breaking point, a line that had been crossed, with no going back. The credit card company finally responded with some good news. After reviewing the case, they agreed to reverse the charges, ruling that the use of Donna's card without explicit permission constituted fraud. The relief was palpable, but it was short-lived. The trip was cancelled, and when her family found out, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Donna's phone buzzed with angry calls and messages from her parents, each one more vicious than the last. Helen left a voicemail, her voice icy with resentment. "You selfish, ungrateful child. How dare you ruin Karen's trip? You've always been jealous of her, haven't you? Always trying to tear her down. Well, congratulations, Donna. You've succeeded." Karen, too, took to social media, posting a tearful video about how her cruel sister had ruined her dream graduation trip. The video went viral within their small circle of friends and extended family, sparking a wave of messages, some supportive but many condemning Donna's actions. It was a nightmare. Donna felt as though her entire world was collapsing, the walls closing in around her. Even people she had considered close friends were turning against her, suggesting that maybe she should have just let her family have the trip, even if it meant accepting the financial hit. But Donna knew better. She wasn't going to be the victim of her family's manipulation anymore. It was time to take control of her own life, even if it meant cutting ties with the people who had raised her. Donna's aunt, Lydia, reached out to her a few weeks later. Lydia had always been something of an outsider in the family, someone Donna could talk to when things got tough. She was blunt, practical, and never sugarcoated the truth. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Lydia said, her voice laced with sympathy. "But I'm not surprised. Your mother's been financially irresponsible for as long as I've known her. She's taken advantage of me a few times, too. It's just that you're the first one to push back." Donna sat in silence, absorbing her aunt's words. She had always suspected there was more to the story, but hearing it confirmed was still a shock. It wasn't just about the trip or the credit card, it was about a pattern of behavior that had been festering for years. "Don't let them guilt you," Lydia continued. "You have every right to protect yourself. If that means going no contact for a while, then so be it. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." The idea of cutting off her family felt impossible, but Donna knew it was the only way to protect herself. She had to break free from the toxic cycle of guilt, manipulation, and financial abuse that had defined so much of her relationship with her parents and sister. She started by changing all her passwords, freezing her credit, and closing the accounts her parents had access to. Then, with a heavy heart, she called her parents and told them she needed space. Helen's response was swift and venomous. "You're going to destroy this family," she spat. "You think you're better than us now? Just wait. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you've done." But Donna didn't waver. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of control, of agency over her own destiny. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. Weeks passed. Donna threw herself into work, into therapy, and into rebuilding her sense of self. The silence from her family was deafening at first, but she slowly began to find peace in the quiet. For the first time in years, she wasn't constantly waiting for the next crisis to erupt, the next demand to be made. Therapy helped her understand the patterns that had shaped her life, the favoritism, the guilt, the constant need to please others at her own expense. It was a painful process, but it was also healing. For so long, she had been defined by her family's expectations, by their demands. Now, she was starting to define herself on her own terms. Then, one day, she received an unexpected call from her father. His voice was subdued, almost apologetic. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Robert said. "I don't agree with how things went down, but I miss you, Donna. And I think maybe we need to talk, really talk, about what's been going on." It wasn't an apology, not yet. But it was a start. And for the first time since the ordeal began, Donna felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Donna hesitated before agreeing to meet her father. His voice had sounded sincere, but the wounds were still fresh, and she wasn't sure she could trust any olive branch extended by her family. However, after weeks of reflection and therapy, she felt strong enough to face him. She knew this conversation could either lead to a genuine reconciliation or expose deeper cracks in their relationship. Either way, she was ready to handle it on her terms. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far enough from familiar faces that Donna felt a little more at ease. Her father arrived before she did, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already on the table, black, just the way Donna liked it. For a moment, the sight of him sitting there, looking a bit older and more worn than she remembered, tugged at her heart. This was the man who had taught her to ride a bike, who had bandaged her knees when she fell. Could he really have been complicit in something so hurtful? "Hi, Dad," Donna said softly as she sat down, her hands clasped tightly around the cup. "Hi, sweetheart," Robert replied, his voice a mix of relief and regret. He looked at her with a kind of sadness she hadn't seen before. It was as if he, too, was feeling the weight of all the years that had passed, of the mistakes he had made. "I'm really glad you came." There was a long silence before either of them spoke again. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. "Look, I know I haven't been the best father lately. Your mother and I, well, we've always had a lot of blind spots when it comes to you and Karen. I see that now, and I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you when it mattered." Donna's chest tightened at his words. It wasn't a full admission of guilt, but it was more than she had ever expected. "Dad, it's not just about this trip," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about a lifetime of putting Karen first. I've always been the one to clean up the messes, to be the responsible one, while you and Mom let her have everything." Robert sighed heavily. "I know. I think, in some ways, your mother and I, well, mostly your mother, just got so caught up in trying to make Karen happy, we lost sight of what that did to you. But the truth is, we've always known you'd be okay. You were always so strong, so independent. And maybe we took advantage of that. But Donna, you have to understand, your mother. She's always had a complicated relationship with money. It's something I've tried to manage, but I failed." This was the first time Donna had ever heard her father acknowledge Helen's financial recklessness. It was as though he had cracked open a door she had never been allowed to peer through. "Aunt Lydia told me a bit about Mom's past," Donna said cautiously. "But I didn't realize how deep it went." Robert nodded, staring down at his cup. "Your mother's family never had much, and when she and I got married, I think she saw my stability as her way out of that. But that came with expectations. Over the years, she started spending to keep up appearances, to keep Karen happy, and I let her. It's no excuse, but that's the truth." Donna's anger softened just a fraction. "Dad, I get it. But you put me in a terrible position. You used me. And worse, you didn't think it was a big deal. That's what hurts the most." Robert leaned forward, his voice quieter now. "I know, Donna. I know. And I can't undo what we did. But I want to make it right, somehow. If you'll let me." There it was, a glimmer of hope, a chance at healing. But Donna wasn't sure if she could trust it yet. "I don't know, Dad. I've started to build a life without all of this. I don't want to go back to being the family fixer, the one who has to sacrifice everything." Robert nodded, his face lined with regret. "You don't have to be that person anymore. I promise." They parted with a tentative understanding. Donna didn't leave the cafe feeling entirely at peace, but for the first time in months, she felt like there might be a future where she and her family could coexist in a healthier way. Despite the small steps toward reconciliation with her father, Donna knew the real reckoning would come when she faced her mother. Helen had been the architect of the family's dysfunction for years, manipulating finances, emotions, and relationships to suit her needs. And while Robert had apologized, Donna wasn't convinced Helen would. A few days after her meeting with Robert, Donna received a letter from her mother. It was handwritten, something Helen hadn't done in years. The letter was short, but the tone was unmistakable, cold, unapologetic, and dripping with self-righteousness. Donna, you've made it very clear where you stand, and I suppose I'll have to accept that. But you should know that you've hurt this family more than you realize. Karen's been devastated, and your father, well, he's trying to hold everything together. But you've made things worse. We've always tried to support you, and this is how you repay us? I won't ask for forgiveness, because clearly, you're not willing to give it. But one day, I hope you look back on this and realize how much damage you've done. Helen. Donna stared at the letter for a long time, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Even now, after everything, her mother couldn't see the truth. She was still trying to manipulate Donna, to guilt her into submission. But it wouldn't work. Not anymore. She didn't respond to the letter. Instead, she showed it to her therapist, who helped her work through the lingering feelings of guilt and responsibility. In therapy, Donna came to understand that she couldn't change her mother. Helen would likely never admit her faults or offer the apology Donna deserved. But that didn't mean Donna had to carry the burden of her mother's choices any longer. Months passed, and with them, the sharp edges of Donna's pain began to soften. She continued therapy, focusing on rebuilding her sense of self-worth and learning how to set boundaries. She still had little contact with her mother, but her relationship with her father slowly began to improve. They met for coffee every few weeks, talking more openly about the family dynamics that had shaped their lives. Karen, on the other hand, remained distant. Despite Donna's efforts to reach out, her sister was still bitter about the cancelled trip. But Donna no longer felt the need to chase Karen's approval or mend fences that weren't ready to be mended. She had spent too much of her life trying to please others at her own expense. Now, she was focused on her own well-being. In one of her final therapy sessions, her therapist asked her a simple but profound question: what does healing look like to you? For Donna, healing wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation, it was about freedom. Freedom from the guilt, the manipulation, the expectations that had weighed her down for so long. It was about learning to trust herself again, to build a life on her own terms. As summer approached, Donna decided to take a trip of her own. Not to Europe, but to a quiet cabin in the mountains where she could spend time reflecting on her journey. The air was crisp, the scent of pine trees filling her lungs as she stood on the porch of the cabin, looking out at the vast expanse of wilderness before her. For the first time in a long time, Donna felt at peace. She knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, her family wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But she had found her strength, her voice, and her sense of self. Sitting on the porch, a cup of tea warming her hands, Donna allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. The silence wasn't lonely, it was comforting. It was the sound of healing, of boundaries being respected, of a life being rebuilt one step at a time. She smiled softly, knowing that she had come through the storm stronger than she had ever imagined. And whatever came next, she was ready. If you liked this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.